The huge arena on planet Kelthara was full of noise and lights. Thousands of strange creatures filled the seats, all wanting to watch the biggest fight in the galaxy. The arena was made of clear crystal that shone with different colors. In the middle stood a giant warrior who looked like he could break rocks with his bare hands. Commander Zektar was 8 feet tall and had 4 arms. His skin looked like thick scales, and his muscles were bigger than tree trunks. He came from a planet where everything was heavy and dangerous. His people, the Vorthok, were known as the best fighters in space. No one had ever beaten Zektar in a fight. Not once in 30 years, Jake Morrison sat in a small corner with the other humans from Earth. There were only 50 people from his planet, and their section looked tiny compared to all the other groups. Jake was 28 years old, had brown hair, and was just under 6 feet tall. Next to the giant aliens around him, he looked like a child. The creatures sitting near the humans were pointing at Jake and making sounds that their machines turned into laughter. They thought it was funny that Earth had sent such a small person to fight. Some of them were taking bets on how fast Jake would lose. Captain Lisa Adams sat next to Jake. She was in charge of the Earth group. "You chose to do this," she told him. "Earth needs to show these aliens that we belong in their club. They only respect people who can fight." Jake watched as Zektar fought other warriors. First came a warrior covered in metal armor from planet Krog. The fight lasted less than 30 seconds. Zektar grabbed the armored fighter with 2 hands and threw him across the arena like he was nothing. The crowd went wild with excitement. Next came a fighter with 6 legs and poison claws. This one lasted a whole minute before Zektar knocked him out cold. Then came fighters from other worlds, some with wings, some with extra arms, some bigger than cars. All of them lost quickly too. The Vorthok champion. The arena had a floating robot that told everyone what was happening. It spoke in a language that all the aliens could understand. "Look at the power of the Vorthok Empire," it said. "Is there anyone in the whole galaxy who can beat Commander Zektar?" The crowd made so much noise that Jake could feel it in his chest. Thousands of different creatures were cheering and making their own battle cries. It sounded like the end of the world. When the robot called Jake's name, something weird happened. The whole arena got quiet for a moment. Then the laughter started. It came from everywhere at once. The aliens thought it was the funniest thing they had ever seen. A tiny human was going to fight the greatest warrior in space. Even some of the people from Earth looked worried. They shifted in their seats and whispered to each other. Jake looked so small compared to what was waiting for him in the arena. Dr. Alan Roberts was the smartest person in the Earth group. He studied alien life forms for a living. He leaned over to Captain Adams and said quietly, "They don't know what they're looking at. These aliens all come from worlds where being big and strong is everything. They've never met people like us." "What do you mean?" Adams asked. "Humans didn't evolve to be the biggest or strongest," Roberts explained. "We evolved to never give up. We're built to keep going when everything else stops." These aliens have no idea what that means. In the arena, Zektar looked down at Jake with what might have been pity. The giant warrior's voice came through the speakers for everyone too. "Here, little human, I don't want to hurt you badly. Maybe you should quit now and keep your honor." The crowd loved this. They cheered for their champion being nice to the weak little creature from Earth. Some of the alien leaders were nodding their heads, thinking Zektar was being very wise and kind. Jake just smiled and started to stretch. His movements looked almost like dancing to the aliens watching. He bent and twisted his body in ways that seemed strange to creatures who are built like tanks and mountains. The referee was a tall, thin creature that looked like a giant bug. It came from a planet of judges who never took sides in fights. The bug judge raised one of its long arms to show that the fight was about to start. Jake looked around the arena one more time. Thousands of aliens were staring at him, most of them still laughing or shaking their heads. They had already decided he would lose. They were just waiting to see how fast it would happen. But Jake knew something they didn't. He had trained his whole life for this moment, not just in fighting, but in never giving up. That was what made humans different from every other creature in the galaxy. When everything else stopped, humans kept going. The bug judge dropped its arm. The fight was about to begin. Zeke-Tar got ready to charge. His forearms spread wide, so Jake couldn't run to either side. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the quick end they all expected. Jake got into a low crouch and waited. His heart was beating fast, but his mind was calm. He knew exactly what he was going to do. The aliens might be bigger and stronger, but they had never learned the most important human skill of all. They had never learned how to hunt something bigger than themselves and never stop until they won. Zeke-Tar charged forward like a moving mountain. His forearms reached out to grab Jake from every direction. The crowd expected to see the small human crushed in seconds. Some aliens had already started looking away, thinking the fight was too sad to watch, but Jake had been waiting for this exact moment. Just when it looked like the giant warrior would smash into him, Jake dropped down and rolled between Zeke-Tar's legs. The move was so fast and smooth that it looked like water flowing around a rock. Zeke-Tar's huge body kept moving forward. He couldn't stop himself in time. He stumbled and spun around, looking confused. For the first time in his life, an opponent had gotten past his opening attack. The crowd stopped laughing. They had never seen their champion look surprised before. "That's impossible," said General Thrak, who led the army of the snake-like Zephyrians. The tiny thing should be dead already. Jake didn't waste any time. While Zeke-Tar was turning around, Jake ran up behind him and hit a spot on the giant's back leg. It wasn't a hard hit, but it was exactly in the right place. Dr. Roberts had spent weeks studying Vorthic body parts. Looking for weak spots, Zeke-Tar felt a sharp pain shoot up his leg. It wasn't bad enough to hurt him seriously, but it made him move differently. He swung one of his big arms at Jake, but the human had already moved away. For the next 10 minutes, Jake kept moving around the arena. He never stayed in one place for more than a few seconds. Every time Zeke-Tar tried to grab him or hit him, Jake was somewhere else. It was like trying to catch smoke with your hands. The aliens in the crowd were getting confused. This wasn't how fights were supposed to work. Usually, the stronger fighter would overpower the weaker one quickly. But Jake wasn't trying to be stronger than Zeke-Tar. He was doing something completely different. "What is the human doing?" asked Commander Vex of the crab-like Shellens. "Why doesn't he stand and fight like a warrior?" Captain Adams heard the question through her translator. She almost laughed. These aliens had no idea what they were watching. "He is fighting like a warrior," she said. "Just not the kind you understand." Jake kept hitting Zeke-Tar in specific spots. A quick jab to the giant's wrist, a light kick to his ankle, a fast punch to his shoulder. None of the hits looked powerful, but each one was placed exactly where it would do the most good. Dr. Roberts had taught Jake were every important nerve and pressure point was located on a Vorthic body. After 15 minutes, something started to change. Zeke-Tar was still moving, but not as fast as before. His breathing was getting heavier. The forearms that had seemed so quick and deadly were now swinging a little slower. The crowd began to notice. These aliens had watched Zeke-Tar fight for years. They knew what he looked like when he was fresh and strong. This was different. Their champion was working harder than he ever had before, and he still hadn't landed a single good hit on his opponent. "This is wrong," muttered the Krogan ambassador. His people were almost as strong as the Vorthik, and they couldn't understand what they were seeing. The human is too small. He has no muscles. How is he doing this? Dr. Roberts smiled as he watched Jake work. The other aliens were looking at this fight all wrong. They thought it was about strength versus weakness. They didn't understand that Jake wasn't trying to overpower Zektar. He was trying to tire him out. Your scanners can measure muscle and bone, Roberts told the confused aliens near him. But they can't measure what makes humans dangerous. We didn't evolve to be the biggest predator on our planet. We evolved to outlast all the other predators. Jake continued his plan. He made Zektar chase him around the arena, forcing the giant to use his strength over and over again. Every few minutes, Jake would dart in close enough to land another precise hit, then dance away before Zektar could respond. The Vorthik warrior was getting frustrated. In all his years of fighting, no one had ever made him work this hard for so long. His opponents usually either beat him quickly or got beaten quickly. This slow, steady pressure was something new and uncomfortable. "Stop running and fight me properly," Zektar called out, his voice already sounding tired. Jake paused his movement for just a moment. "I am fighting you properly," he replied. "This is how humans fight when we need to win." The words carried across the arena, translated into dozens of alien languages. For the first time, some of the creatures in the crowd began to understand that they might have made a mistake about the small human 20 minutes into the fight. Zektar was sweating. His thick, scaly skin was wet with moisture, and his breathing came in heavy puffs. The 4 arms that had looked so threatening at the start were now moving like they were carrying heavy weights. Jake, on the other hand, looked almost the same as when he had started. His breathing was faster, but not by much. His movements were still quick and smooth. He had trained for this his entire adult life, and his body was built for exactly this kind of long, steady effort. The arena had become very quiet. Thousands of aliens were watching something they had never seen before. Their greatest warrior, the unbeatable champion of the galaxy, was being slowly worn down by a creature they had dismissed as weak and worthless. General Thrak leaned forward in his seat. "How much longer can this continue?" he asked his aide. The aide checked his instruments. The human's heart rate is elevated but stable. His energy readings show he can maintain this pace for hours if necessary. And Zektar? The commander is using energy much faster than he can replace it. If this continues, he will begin to weaken significantly. For the first time since the fight began, some of the aliens started to worry. What if their champion actually lost to this tiny human? What would that mean for everything they thought they knew about strength and power? 30 minutes had passed since the fight began. Something was happening that no one in the arena had ever seen before. Commander Zektar, the greatest warrior in the galaxy, was getting tired. Really tired. His 4 massive arms hung lower than they had at the start. When he swung them at Jake, they moved through the air like they were pushing through thick mud. Sweat poured down his scaly face, and his breathing sounded like a broken machine. Jake kept moving around him in circles. The human looked like he could keep doing this all day. His steps were still light and quick. His hits were still precise and painful. Every few minutes, he would dart in close, strike a nerve or pressure point, then slip away before Zektar could respond. The crowd had stopped making noise. Thousands of aliens sat in complete silence, watching something that challenged everything they believed about fighting and strength. Many of them were starting to feel uncomfortable. Their champion wasn't supposed to struggle like this. "This is impossible," whispered Commander Vex to his aide. "Look at the size difference. The human should have been destroyed in the first minute." His aide was checking readings on a small device. "Sir, the human is using only about 30% of his maximum energy output. Commander Zektar is approaching 80% and climbing." General Thrax stood up in his seat. His snake-like body was tense with worry. What kind of creature is this human? What planet creates beings that can do this? Dr. Roberts heard the question and decided to answer. He stood up so his voice would carry to the nearby alien delegations. Earth creates beings like this, he sighed. Our planet taught us that being the biggest doesn't matter. Being the strongest doesn't matter. What matters is never giving up. Explain, demanded the Krogan ambassador. His people were almost as strong as the Vorthok, and this human's success was making him nervous about his own military plans. On Earth, humans weren't the biggest predators, Roberts continued. We weren't the fastest or the strongest, but we were the best at something else. We were the best at hunting down animals much bigger than ourselves and following them until they collapsed from exhaustion. We call it persistence hunting. Jake demonstrated this ancient human skill perfectly. He stayed just out of Zektar's reach, forcing the giant warrior to keep moving, keep swinging, keep trying to catch him. Every movement Zektar made used up energy he couldn't get back. You're like a ghost, Zektar panted as he stumbled after Jake. How do you keep moving like that? Jake didn't answer with words. Instead, he moved in closer and landed 3 quick strikes on Zektar's ribs. Each hit targeted a spot where Dr. Roberts had identified nerve clusters. The giant warrior grunted in pain and swung wildly with 2 arms. But Jake had already danced away. 40 minutes into the fight, Zektar's legs started to shake. His massive body was running out of fuel. The high-gravity world he came from had made him incredibly strong, but it had also made him dependent on short, powerful bursts of energy. He wasn't built for this kind of long, steady battle. Captain Adams watched with growing amazement. She had known Jake was one of their best soldiers, but seeing him systematically break down the galaxy's greatest warrior was something else entirely. He's actually going to do it, she whispered to herself. The other humans in their small section were starting to smile. They could see what the aliens couldn't yet understand. Jake wasn't just winning this fight. He was proving that everything the galaxy thought about Earth was wrong. Look at him, said Lieutenant Carol White, another member of the Earth military. He's not even breathing hard. Meanwhile, their champion looks like he's about to fall over. Jake continued his patient, methodical approach. He never rushed. He never got excited. He just kept doing what humans had done for thousands of years on Earth. He kept hunting his prey, wearing it down bit by bit until it couldn't run anymore. Zektar tried a desperate move. He charged forward with all 4 arms spread wide, hoping to corner Jake against the arena wall. But Jake had been expecting this. He waited until the last second, then dropped to the ground and rolled between the giant's legs again. This time, Zektar couldn't stop himself. He crashed into the crystal wall with tremendous force. The impact shook the entire arena and left a crack in the supposedly unbreakable surface. The crowd gasped as their champion slowly pushed himself away from the wall, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. Yield, Jake said quietly, but his voice carried clearly in the silent arena. You've fought with honor, but if you keep going, you're going to get hurt badly. The translator systems carried Jake's words to every creature in the stadium. Many of them had never heard the concept of showing mercy to a defeated opponent. In most alien cultures, fights continued until someone couldn't continue. Zektar turned to face Jake, his 4 arms trembling with exhaustion. I don't understand, he said between heavy breaths. You could have seriously injured me many times. Why didn't you? Because hurting you wasn't the point, Jake replied, still moving in. A slow circle around the exhausted giant. The point was to prove that Earth deserves respect. I think we've done that. The alien delegations were buzzing with quiet conversations. Representatives from dozens of species were rapidly reassessing everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Military advisors were frantically calculating what this meant for their defense plans. "If one human can do this to our strongest warrior," General Thrak said to his staff, "what could 1,000 humans do to our armies?" Dr. Roberts smiled as he heard similar conversations happening throughout the arena. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand that evolution didn't always favor the biggest and strongest. Sometimes it favored the most persistent. Jake could see that Zektar was nearly finished. The giant warrior's legs were shaking so badly he could barely stand. His breathing came in ragged gasps that echoed through the arena. But still, he refused to give up. "I have never been defeated," Zektar said, trying to raise his arms for another attack. "I cannot be the first Vorthic champion to lose." "You're not losing," Jake told him gently. "You're learning. There's a difference." 50 minutes had passed. Commander Zektar dropped to one knee in the center of the arena. His 4 massive arms could no longer support his own weight. Every breath was a struggle, and sweat poured from his body like a waterfall. The unbeatable champion of the galaxy was broken. Jake Morrison stood 10 feet away, his uniform barely showing signs of the long fight. His breathing was steady and controlled. He could have continued for hours more if needed. The difference between the two fighters was now impossible to ignore. The arena was so quiet that every alien could hear Zektar's labored breathing. No one was laughing anymore. No one was taking bets. Thousands of creatures from across the galaxy were witnessing something that would change their understanding of warfare forever. "Impossible," breathed the Krogan ambassador. His people had built their entire military strategy around overwhelming physical force. Watching Jake systematically dismantle their methods was terrifying. General Thrak was frantically speaking into a communication device, calling his home planet. "We need to completely revise our intelligence reports on Earth," he said. "Everything we thought we knew about human military capability is wrong." Captain Adams felt tears in her eyes as she watched her soldier prove that humanity deserved place among the stars. For too long, Earth had been treated like a primitive backwater planet. Now, one man was changing that perception with nothing but determination and skill. Dr. Roberts was taking notes as fast as he could write. The other alien scientists around him were bombarding him with questions about human physiology and evolution. They couldn't understand how a species that looked so weak could be so effective in combat. "Your heart rates are lower than ours," said a tall, blue-skinned creature from the Cerulean system. "Your muscle density is less. Your bone structure is lighter. By every measure we understand, you should be inferior fighters." "You're measuring the wrong things," Roberts explained patiently. "You're looking at maximum power output. We evolved for sustained power output. You're built for short, intense battles. We're built for long wars." In the arena, Zektar was struggling to stay conscious. His vision was blurry, and his arms felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds each. He had never experienced anything like this in his life. The exhaustion was total and overwhelming. Jake approached slowly, his hands raised to show he wasn't attacking. "Commander, you need to yield. Your body can't take much more of this." "I have never yielded," Zektar whispered, barely able to speak. "No Vorthic warrior has ever yielded in single combat." "Then you'll be the first," Jake said gently. "Sometimes, being first at something new is more important than being last at something old." The words hit Zektar like a physical blow. He had spent his entire life being the strongest, the fastest, the most feared warrior in known space. The idea that there might be other ways to measure a fighter's worth had never occurred to him. Around the arena, military leaders from dozens of species were having emergency discussions with their home planets. If humans could do this to the Vorthic, what did it mean for their own military plans? How do you fight an enemy that never gets tired? How do you defeat warriors who see exhausting their opponents as a valid strategy? "We've been thinking about warfare all wrong," admitted Commander Vex to his aide. "We focus on ending fights quickly with overwhelming force. But what if the enemy refuses to let the fight end quickly?" His aide was studying readings from the arena floor. "Sir, the human could theoretically maintain his current activity level for 6 to 8 hours. Commander Zektar will be unconscious within minutes if this continues." Jake could see that Zektar was at his limit. The giant warrior was swaying on his knees, barely able to keep his eyes open. It would be cruel to continue the fight any longer. But Jake also knew that how he ended this battle would be remembered throughout the galaxy. "Commander Zektar," Jake said loudly enough for his voice to carry throughout the arena, "you are the greatest warrior your people have ever produced. You have brought honor to the Vorthic Empire for 30 years. No one can ever take that away from you." Zektar looked up at Jake with confusion in his 4 eyes. He had expected mockery or contempt from his opponent. Instead, he was hearing respect and understanding. "But today, you learned something new," Jake continued. "You learned that there are different kinds of strength. You learned that sometimes the best warrior isn't the one who can hit the hardest, but the one who can keep fighting the longest." The translator systems carried Jake's words to every corner of the arena. Alien cultures that had never heard concepts like honor in defeat or learning from failure were struggling to understand what the human was saying. "I yield," Zektar said suddenly, his voice carrying clearly despite his exhaustion. "The human warrior has defeated me through methods I cannot counter. He has shown me that there are ways of fighting I never imagined." The silence that followed was complete. Then, slowly, something unprecedented happened. The Vorthic delegation stood up and began to applaud. They were honoring not just their champion's gracious defeat, but Jake's demonstration of a completely new form of warfare. Other species joined in. The applause spread throughout the arena as thousands of aliens acknowledged what they had witnessed. The small human who had been dismissed as weak had proven that strength came in many forms. Jake walked over to where Zektar knelt and extended his hand. The Vorthic warrior looked at it for a moment, then reached out with one trembling arm to clasp it. The gesture was broadcast live to billions of beings across the galaxy. "Thank you," Zektar whispered. "Thank you for showing me that I still had things to learn." Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor to help the exhausted champion. As they supported his massive frame, Zektar looked back at Jake one more time. "I will never forget this lesson," he said, "and neither will anyone else who is here today." As the medical teams helped Zektar from the arena, Jake stood alone in the center of the crystal floor. The applause continued, growing louder as more aliens understood what they had witnessed. The tiny spider from Earth had brought down the galaxy's greatest warrior, and he had done it with nothing but patience, skill, and the refusal to give up. The news of Jake Morrison's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communications. Within hours, every major species in the Galactic Alliance was talking about the small human who had defeated their greatest warrior. Military bases on thousands of worlds were suddenly very interested in learning more about Earth's fighting methods. Captain Adams found herself surrounded by alien diplomats and military leaders who wanted to speak with her immediately. The small Earth delegation, which had been mostly ignored when they arrived, was now the most sought-after group on the planet. "We need to discuss military cooperation agreements," said General Thrak, his snake-like body coiled with nervous energy. "Our intelligence services completely underestimated human capabilities. We want to learn from your methods." Similar requests came from representatives of dozens of other species. The Krogans wanted to hire human military advisors. The Shell. People wanted to trade technology for training programs. Even the proud Vorthic Empire was asking for meetings to discuss joint military exercises. Dr. Roberts was having the time of his life. Alien scientists who had dismissed human biology as primitive were now asking detailed questions about Earth's evolution and physiology. They wanted to understand how persistence hunting had shaped human development. Your species evolved on a planet with changing climates and diverse threats, he explained to a group of fascinated researchers. We couldn't specialize in one environment or one type of prey. We had to become generalists who could adapt to anything and outlast everything. A blue-skinned scientist from the Cerulean system raised a tentacled arm. But surely this endurance comes at a cost? Your maximum strength output is much lower than most species. That's the point, Roberts replied with a smile. We gave up peak power for sustained power. We chose to be the tortoise instead of the hare. And today, everyone saw how that story ends. Meanwhile, Jake was in the medical center visiting Commander. Zektar, a massive Vorthic warrior, was recovering in a bed designed for his species, with monitoring equipment attached to all 4 arms. He looked up when Jake entered the room. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked, pulling up a chair next to the bed. "Like I have been through a training program designed by demons," Zektar replied, but there was no anger in his voice. "My body feels like it weighs twice as much as normal." "Is this what exhaustion feels like?" I had forgotten. Jake nodded. "It'll pass in a day or 2. Your people are incredibly strong. You just weren't built for the kind of fight I forced you into." "I have been thinking about our battle," Zektar said, struggling to sit up straighter. "In all my years of combat, I focused on ending fights quickly. I never considered what would happen if an opponent refused to let the fight end quickly. That's the key to human military strategy," Jake explained. "We don't try to win battles in the first few minutes. We try to make sure we're still fighting when our enemies are too tired to continue." Zektar was quiet for a long moment. "This changes everything, doesn't it? Not just for me, but for how warfare is conducted throughout the galaxy." "Maybe," Jake said. "Or maybe it just gives everyone more options to consider." Over the following days, the political implications of the fight became clear. Earth's status in the Galactic Alliance changed overnight. The planet that had been considered a minor member was suddenly being treated as a major military power. Captain Adams was appointed as Earth's first military liaison to the Alliance Council. The position had been created specifically to bring human tactical thinking into galactic defense planning. She found herself advising alien generals who had centuries more experience than she did. "The problem with our current strategies," she explained to a council meeting filled with military leaders from across the galaxy, "is that they assume all battles will be decided by whoever can apply the most force the fastest. But what if your enemy is willing to turn every engagement into a battle of attrition?" The assembled aliens shifted uncomfortably. Many of their species had built their entire military doctrines around quick, decisive victories. The idea of prolonged conflicts where endurance mattered more than firepower was deeply unsettling. General Thrax spoke up from his position at the council table. "Our war games have always focused on rapid deployment and overwhelming force projection. We've never prepared for enemies who might simply outlast us." "Then you've been preparing for the wrong kind of war," Adams replied. "On Earth, we have. A saying, 'The race doesn't always go to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Sometimes it goes to whoever refuses to quit.'" The Krogan ambassador leaned forward with interest. "Are you suggesting that our military superiority might be ... incomplete?" "I'm suggesting that military superiority has more dimensions than you've been considering," Adams said diplomatically. "Physical strength and technological advantage are important, but they're not the only factors that determine victory." Back on Earth, Jake found himself promoted to colonel and put in charge of a new training program. The Galactic Alliance wanted to understand human military methods and Earth was happy to share them in exchange for advanced technology and improved diplomatic status. The first class of alien trainees arrived 6 months after the arena fight. They came from a dozen different species, all eager to learn the secrets of human endurance and tactical thinking. Jake looked at the mixed group of students and smiled. "Welcome to persistence training," he told them. "The first thing you need to understand is that this isn't about becoming stronger or faster. It's about becoming impossible to stop." A young Vorthake officer raised one of his forearms. "Sir, my people are already incredibly strong. Why do we need to learn human methods?" "Because strength without endurance is like a candle without wax," Jake replied. "It burns bright for a moment, then it's gone. We're going to teach you how to be a steady flame that burns for hours, instead of a flare that burns out in minutes." The training program became legendary throughout the galaxy. Officers from the most advanced military academies in known space came to Earth to learn from humans. The planet that had once been dismissed as primitive became the center of a revolution in military thinking. Dr. Roberts was invited to speak at universities across the galaxy about human evolution and its implications for understanding different types of intelligence and capability. His lectures were attended by packed auditoriums of scientists eager to learn about persistence hunting and endurance evolution. "The lesson of Earth," he would tell his audiences, "is that evolution doesn't always produce the biggest or the strongest. Sometimes it produces the most persistent. And in a universe full of challenges, persistence might be the most valuable trait of all." Years later, when military historians wrote about the moment that changed galactic warfare, they would point to Jake Morrison's victory over Commander Zektar. They would call it the day the galaxy learned that the smallest warrior could bring down the mightiest opponent, not through strength or speed, but through the simple refusal to give up. The tiny spider from Earth had indeed dropped the galaxy's strongest warrior. But more importantly, it had taught the entire galaxy a new way to think about strength, endurance, and what it truly meant to be unbeatable.